The children in the lift must mind those doors, mind those doors, mind those doors. Little things on the lift must mind those doors all day long.
Not quite sure how this will work with Ted.
What is anxiety? Everyone feels uneasy about a particular situation. So anxiety to me is something that is very, very normal.
Welcome back to the channel. We have with us today Martin McCarthy from Our Mental Health Matters. Our subject matter today is anxiety. We're going to talk about a little bit the causes of anxiety and the various different aspects of it. We've got Ted here on shot. Obviously dogs, they can help with anxiety and things like that as well. Not quite sure how this will work with Ted, but we'll see what it happens, and we'll persevere and we'll wing it. But we'll see. We'll see how it. we'll see what happens.
We're not going to stress about it. That's the key.
Yeah. We'll try not to. Although deep down inside, I probably am a little bit. I probably am a little bit anxious about Anyway, we'll see what happens. So, anxiety.
Yep.
Where do we start with that subject?
Anxiety, unbelievable subject matter. So. What is anxiety? So to me, when I talk to people, anxiety is a feeling of unease, it's a feeling of worry, or it's a fear of a certain situation. And so it manifests itself then into other symptoms, other signs that then get people worried, for the want of a word. So to me, with mental health, I think I've always said, I think it's a fear disorder. So anxiety starts with a fear of something, okay, that then provides those feelings. And so anxiety then gets accompanied by certain things like, your heart racing, or sweating, or feeling sick, or getting hot. There's lots of symptoms that go with anxiety. But for me, when I talk to people about anxiety, it's just a feeling that they go through that they then are worrying about something. Okay. And so we talk about the fear disorder. I often talk about it. There will always be something to somebody who's struggling with anxiety that has triggered it. Okay. And we call it a trauma. Okay. Or a trigger, whichever we do. And so for myself, just from a personal experience, if ever I've got a situation coming up and I'm worrying about it, I will always feel anxious. Now, it might be anxious that I've got to complete something on time. It might be anxious that I've got to pay the bills. It might be anxious that we're going on holiday and I've got to buy new clothes, or it's anxious that I've got to put food on the table for the children. And so at every stage of probably anyone's life, we will come across anxiety because everyone worries. Everyone feels uneasy about a particular situation. And so anxiety to me is something that is very, very normal.
So anxiety is really, it's part of everyday life.
Yes.
I suppose when does it become a mental health problem? At what point does anxiety cross over from just being a bit anxious about not making it to the airport?
Yep.
You left 3 hours to get to Gatwick and the bridge is shut or something like that. At what point does it cross over from
from needing help to just a normal so we class it as from mild to severe symptoms.
Right.
So from an anxiety point of view, a mild symptom might be, like you just said, I've left for the holiday, I'm getting a flight and I think I haven't locked the front door. So you worry about it, but then you let go of it. For someone who suffers really badly with anxiety, that feeling doesn't go away. And then what tends to happen is it manifests itself into something else. So whenever I'm talking to someone, I always like to go back and use examples because I think it's quite key. But let's say, for instance, for me, if we take that subject matter and I'm going on holiday and I think I haven't locked the front door, and I'm driving to the airport and it starts out as a thought and a feeling, and then it starts to then impact on me. It starts to make me think, do you know what, I need to get in the car and I need to go home and I need to check. Okay, and that then forms into your OCDs and various things like that. But if it then starts to take over your life, if it starts to kind of make symptoms happen that are then affecting you in other ways, that's when we'd sort of say, well, that's severe anxiety. And so that then starts to impact on other things that you do. And so that's when I would say to people, if it's something that's starting to impact on your daily life, okay, or for prolonged periods of time, that's when you need to seek help. Because as you said, anxiety is a normal thing, okay? Anxiety could be, you know, like we said, you know, I've got to be somewhere and I've got to leave and I think the traffic might be bad. Well, we'll get anxious about that. But if it's something where, you know, you're leaving 3 hours before because you don't want to kind of make sure that you're late for an appointment and it's dictating your whole life, and because of that you can't do something else that you wanted to do, that starts to then become kind of severe anxiety.
And what sort of symptoms would someone with anxiety, what sort of symptoms would they have? Because, you know, I don't know whether, you know, I would have suffered from depression, sleep disorder. I wouldn't say I've ever suffered from anxiety, but I don't know, I may have done, but it's not something that I'd really dwell on. What sort of symptoms would?
From a personal experience, several symptoms that I experience. So it could be not sleeping, could be sleeping too much, could be not eating to overeating. It could be heart palpitations. It could be the feeling of breathlessness. It could be, I think I'm going to pass out, which some people identify as a panic attack. It could be sweating. It could be feeling of being sick. There are so many symptoms that are related to anxiety if you go onto a list and have a look at it, and everyone is different. And I think this is what we said about mental health. You know, it's not a one case fits all with people. People will experience different things, but there is a mediocre of certain things that people will always experience, like I've just mentioned. But it's that case of identifying them for what they are, and is it something that potentially may have happened before, or is this a new thing? Is it over a prolonged period of time? Because if it's over a prolonged period of time, then that's when we maybe need to put our hands up and say, you know, I need to get help.
And from your perspective,
Yep.
and quite often I've been on courses where you've taken the course and you
Yep.
talk about your own
Yep.
own things.
Yep.
What did you become anxious about? So are you would you say you was a sufferer, or you are a sufferer, have been a sufferer of anxiety, or not necessarily anxiety, other things?
No, I was definitely a sufferer of anxiety.
Right.
I think I probably still am to a smaller degree, because like we've said on previous episodes, it never goes away. So my anxiety would be silly things, and I'll give you an example. My wife was pregnant, and so it was our first child, and you're ecstatic, yay! And then once you come back down to a bit of normality, you then started to think, oh my God, she's pregnant.
Right.
I'm going to be a dad. I can't be a dad. I can't look after myself. And so as the stages of the pregnancy went through, you get past the 12-week scan and you hear all these stories of people that lose babies along the way. And so you're anxious. You know, you're anxious. Is everything okay? And then your wife comes down and she says, oh, I'm not eating, or, you know, oh, I don't feel right at the moment, and I can't feel the heartbeat of the baby. Well, you go from a feeling of ease to anxiety. You know, you're stressed, you're worried, oh my God, I'm fearful that something's going to go wrong. My wife fell over. We rushed to the hospital.
Mine
God.
did actually. My wife fell over. I don't know if you just used that as an anecdote, but my wife actually fell over in the garden when she was about 7 or 8 months pregnant. And that was a...
And it's a worrying moment. And it's exactly what happened. It was snowing. I remember it vividly. And my wife fell over. And I just thought to myself, oh my God, because for an hour afterwards, she's saying to me, I can't feel the baby. Now, that then caused anxiety for me. I go back to my working relationship. So I would go to work, you've got targets to hit, and it doesn't look like I'm going to hit it. Now, I'm used to hitting the target and getting money. So I've associated the money coming in. Now I'm not going to hit the target. I'm anxious. What am I going to do for the money? You know, am I going to be able to survive? Is the boss going to get rid of me? So that fear and anxiety is constant in relation to many things. So like I say, we go on holiday. It's a great time. We're getting married. It's a great time. But there is so much anxiety that goes with it. I'm getting married. Well, hey, I've got to pay for the wedding. Yeah. Oh my God. You know, is everything going to go right? I've got 100 people sitting, but I've not invited Auntie Mary and Auntie Josie, you know.
Yeah, see, I think that scenario would make me anxious. The holiday thing, I'm a bit strange around holidays because I enjoy the build up to a holiday.
Yeah.
because for me that's the excitement period of time.
Yep.
And actually, once I'm on the holiday, I'm then sort of looking at, oh no, it's going to end soon.
100%.
You know, so I don't really have any anxiety leading up to a holiday.
Yep.
I've probably got more anxiety coming back,
home,
knowing that you've got to come back to real life.
Well, more often than not, and this is based on people that I've talked to, but for women, going on holiday is a stressful time, right? For men, we're very much like, yeah, pack me trunks, put me sliders in.
Don't need much, do we?
Right, I'm away. But for a woman, especially if she's got children, she has to think about, I've got to pack the cases for them. I've got to make sure they've got enough. Have I got enough lotion? Have we got the right amount of money?
Yeah.
Have I got the clothes for the kids? I might need to.
Tickets.
100%, get them in the right clothing. No, they haven't got the clothing, I've got to go shopping for it. They're packing, they're making sure that we've got the tickets, the boarding passes, everything. As men, we just, lovely, here we go. So for women, especially, it's quite a kind of an anxious time, because if they get there and they've not brought something, I was supposed to bring the anti-repellent, I was supposed to bring the plug because it's a 2-phase, not 3-phase, right? So lots of that for some people is just normal, okay? But if you're an anxiety sufferer, that then tends to take over certain things. So you kind of get there and you're worrying about certain things that maybe we shouldn't be worrying about. However, that's us as people. And so, like I say, you could apply it to everything. If you're going out at a weekend, and some people might adhere to this, some people might not. But you're worrying on the Tuesday about what you're going to wear on the Saturday. Is she going to look better than me? Is he going to look better than me?
True, yeah.
Do I look all right? Do I smell nice? Am I going to have enough money to go out? Is people going to be looking at me? So all of this stuff, which we take for granted, is stuff that triggers people to then suffer with anxiety. And that's why people say to me, I don't know if I suffer with anxiety. I say, well, you will, but only when we identify that particular subject matter or those reasonings do we do it. And then when you sort of say it to people, they go, oh yeah, do you know what? I get you now because and then they start to open up about certain things. And that's what I say. It's not a male or a female thing. It's just a human nature thing. So anxiety is something that is very real. And like I said to you, from work through to personal relationships, through to how you look. For some people, it's really important how they look. And so they get anxious. Is my hair looking all right? Do I look old? Do I look young? Do I look... Yeah, exactly. So for lots of people, we are very anxious about lots of stuff. And so again, go back into a work environment. The anxiety comes from leaders because they're looking at the spreadsheets.
It's good timing, isn't it?
Yeah, brilliant. Big hovercraft going above us.
Sorry, go on.
But for leaders, whatever role you're in, there will be pressure, there will be stress, there will be anxiety, because you might be the MD and you're seeing the spreadsheets, the profit and loss, and you're looking at it thinking, oh my God, if we continue like this, I might have to make some redundancies, right? The person that's working on the shop floor is there going, oh my God, there's not much productivity going on. Does that mean they might get rid of me? People that are managers of people that are in the middle of MDs through to shop floor workers, they're the ones that maybe potentially will have to make the redundancies. So the fear and the anxiety is always going to be there. So to kind of finalise it, anxiety is everywhere. Anxiety is happening in my life so much. And then what tends to happen is that you then get so engulfed with anxiety that it starts to breed out in a multitude of different ways. So you get anxious about certain things. And like I said, so in order to relieve that anxiety, I think if I pray a couple of times, it will go away. Or if I flick lights on and off, it will go away. Or if I touch that crack in the floor, it will go away. Or if I spend money, it will go away. But all that's ever doing is then creating the next problem.
Is that like a footballer wearing a lucky pair of socks and
100%.
doing certain processes leading up to the game?
100%. And having worked in football, the person that has to wear the same pants because they've won in the game, the person that as they go over the line, and everyone will see this in a game of football, they bless themselves or they hop on one leg or one boot's this different colour to everyone's got a certain symptom, and some people go, well, that's just superstition. But the fact of the matter is you can't not do it. And so then that becomes the anxiety. If I don't do it and something was to go wrong, is that now on me? And so that's where we create this fear, the fear of something going wrong. So that's where anxiety is.
Yeah. So what would you advise, so if someone is quite an anxious person,
yep.
What's the best thing to help that? So I spoke to Steve Smith and we spoke a lot about breathing technique.
Yep.
and he does quite a lot of that with his mind coaching and things like that.
Yep.
So obviously breathing techniques is going to be one thing. What,
Yep.
what other things would you suggest?
There's lots of different things over the courses of being in counselling and being in therapy. There's various things for anxiety. What we try to do with anxiety is to try and get us out of that situation, so out of that thought process.
Okay.
So breathing is something I've done. I'd even go as low as so on EastEnders last night, but a young lady had an elastic band, and what we do is we ping ourselves with it, and it's that little moment of not pain as such, but that it shocks you out of being in that situation. For me,
I'm still shocked you're watching EastEnders.
Oh, no, but listen, that's
I
a
can't
family
get past
thing with
that
the
now.
wife.
That's going to be really hard for me to get past.
Yeah, and probably people won't
so there
want
was
me
a
in their
character on
businesses.
there who had this.
Yeah,
Is that a well-known way of actually?
Well, it's a coping mechanism.
Right.
So what we talk about is coping mechanism. So the guy you mentioned before has a coping mechanism where he would breathe. So it might be 4 shallow breaths, 3 heavy outputs. Some people like to smell something that would shock them back into the room. Some people have got this. Some people go and have cold showers to try and get themselves out of the anxiety mode. So if we look at Wim Hof, who has been on the telly recently, and he sort of says you can fix yourself with certain things, whether it's right or wrong, that's his methodology. So everyone has their own methodology, but I just want to reiterate it again. It's not a one thing fixes. It's an individual circumstance that relates to the person in question. And so for me, I used to go and lay down. I wanted to try and imagine myself going into a room and just having a big red stop button and pressing it, and that would just make me stop at that time. But again, like anything, you have to train yourself. In order to get better at something, you've got to train yourself. So breathing techniques, 100%. Like I said, shock therapy, if that's the want of the word. Incense, where people are smelling something, which kind of changes their mood and changes their thought pattern. The key is just to try to change that thinking behaviour at that particular time.
So it's like a distraction technique in a way. So people, sometimes people talk about, and I spoke about this before, about being in the present. If you're going outside, listen to a bird, listen to trees, or listen to something, and they're all sort of distraction techniques.
100%.
But what I found is, in and around trying to use a distraction technique, is I get bored.
Yeah.
How do you remain focused on that technique? And from your experience, because one of the things I struggled with is remaining focused on things generally. Yeah. Being in the present, as they say. I could never watch a TV program or anything like that. So to actually carry out a technique and continue to do a technique, what's your advice on doing that? Because I couldn't manage it.
No, but again, it comes back to it's teaching yourself, it's training, it's continuity of trying to do something, because nothing's going to happen overnight. Right, so we have to train ourselves. And I got to a point where, in order to help my anxiety, I used to write things down. So we'll have all been there, maybe some have, some haven't, where we get into a point where we're anxious in the middle of the night. You just wake up and you've got 1,000 thoughts going around your head. Is it, I've got to be in work early tomorrow, or I've got to hit that target, I've only got 3 days, and And what I used to do was, I used to write it down. Okay, because then when I was feeling better, I'd go back and I'd re-educate myself that was the feeling that I had at that particular time. Now, did it make sense? A lot of the time, no. It's jargon. We're just writing stuff down for the want of it. Yeah. But I then learned to reread it and go, okay, was there any logic and evidence in what I was thinking at that particular time? And so what tends to happen is someone goes through it time after time after time after time after time. And then what they can't do is they can't reteach themselves to go, do you know what? I worried about that. Did it ever come to fruition? And as sufferers...
Probably not.
No, but as sufferers, we do this 1,000 times, and more often than not, it's 1,000 times it doesn't come to fruition. But how do we re-educate that process? So for me, it was a case of writing it down. And there's been times where I've gone back, even now, to books I wrote 3 years ago about a feeling that was so intense to me at that particular time that I worried about. I was anxious. It was causing lots of different things. And when I read back on it now, I go, well, nothing ever came of that. Yeah. So that feeling that I had at that time, did it justify what I then did next? And so I ended up teaching myself, do you know what? It's just a feeling. It's just a feeling. It will pass if I do the right things, if I educate myself to just understand, look, that's happened today. Did it materialise into anything? No. The 100% anxiety might be 99 the next time. Then it might be 98, and then 97, 96, 90, 80. And it starts to bring itself down. And that's where you get into things like CBT, which is cognitive behaviour therapy, which is a completely different thing. But there are certain things which we can do as individuals to help ourselves. Okay. But to answer your question, it's not a one fixes all. It's something that you will do that helps you, because writing might not be for everyone, but it was good for me and it helped me. Whereas pinging an elastic band, I tried it. Pouring cold water on my head, I tried everything. Acupuncture, hypnotherapy, hydrotherapy, anything because you are desperate at that time.
I hate acupuncture.
To get better.
I hated the feeling of acupuncture.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't have it for any sort of mental health related issue. It was more to do with an injury.
Yeah.
I didn't even realise, do they do acupuncture to help from a mental health perspective?
Yeah,
or is it more of an injury perspective?
No, to be honest with you, there are lots of different things. Listen, in the world that we're in at the moment, there are lots of different solutions for certain things. So hydrotherapy, hypnotherapy, electrotherapy, there's lots. Now, for me personally, the only thing that really helped me was education.
Yeah.
Education, putting things into practice, seeing how it works, re-establishing my persona of going, do you know what, I did worry about that, and my God, it took over my whole life. Did anything come of it? No. So the next time it happened, it wasn't 100%. It was still anxious, but I started to teach myself that it was just the nature's body and feelings, whether it's a physical or a psychological thing that takes place within your body, that made you stop at that particular moment and feel anxious. And then once you start to see that it never really justifies what goes on, you start to trust yourself to go, okay, I know this is just what's happening now. If I just bear with it, or if I distract myself for a period of time, it'll go away. And that's what I say. I've had people that I work with, educate. I hate the word counsellor. I hate the word psychotherapy. I'm an educator. I've just sat with people and I've sort of said, look, what's worked for you? And they've said, well, I've gone and had a hot bath. I've gone and just smelt aromatherapy candles. I've gone and laid down. I've listened to an audio podcast. I've watched telly. Whatever it is that brings your levels of heightened anxiety down is good. Okay. And like I said to you, whatever helps and fixes that person, that's the right thing. There's no right or wrong.
Well, it's actually really sort of insightful, really, and obviously we covered different techniques there.
Yeah.
Anxiety, and obviously levels of anxiety.
Yeah.
And interesting, a lot of it is actually based around distraction techniques. So, although this is going off the subject a little bit, one of the things that helped me when I had problems in and around sleeping, and they say not to do this, but I'd done it. I actually used to watch a 5-10 minute YouTube video. Now they say about don't do it because of the bright lights, this, that, and all, but it used to distract me away from whatever I was laying in bed thinking about at the time. So even that actually come down to a distraction technique, although it was one that's not necessarily advisable, but it worked for me. So that goes back to what you're saying. It's what works for the person, and that's really my convoluted way of saying it. Is actually I agree with you, because I found a solution that was actually one that people don't necessarily advise, but 100%. It did actually work for me.
100%. When I was at my worst, and again I'll share this, it was with driving cars. So I always had a fear. Okay, anxiety is the fear, but I always had a fear that I would hit someone in a car, or I'd done something wrong in a car. And it got to the stage where, and this is where people will understand this and may be able to kind of allude to it, but I would be driving in a car, I'd get a mile down the road and I'd stop and I'd look in my wing mirror or my rear mirror, and I'd look to see if something's gone wrong. And when it hadn't, I'd go, great. So that feeling of, oh, brilliant, nothing's happened, right? I then go and start the car again, and the next pothole I'd hit would happen, and I'd pull over and I'd look again and I'd say, oh, great, it was just a pothole, and I'd stop. Now that became really tiring. Okay, so it got to the point where at the beginning I'm going home and I'm saying to my wife, I think I've done something wrong, and I was getting in the car and I was going back to the scene and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. knowing full well that nothing had happened, but it was the impulsiveness that I had to go and do something. And so it took over my life. So that's where the anxiety took over for me. But then what I started to do was I started to write it down. And I know I've said this before, but I started to write it down, and I would say, this is the feeling that I've got at this moment in time. And what were the physical symptoms? What were the psychological symptoms? You know, how did my skin look? Was I red? Was I hot? And I'd write it all down. And I just had to get through that phase. Now people go, yeah, but how do you? Because when you've got that feeling of, I just have to fix this, I have to get right. I can't explain it in a way of it's just nature's process that you've got to do this. You have to be brave, because reassurance is actually a bad thing at times, because all it ever does is prolong the problem. So going home to my wife and saying, can you come with me and just make sure that nothing's happened? Well, the next day, the same scenario happened again, because she's not in the car with me and she can't see it. So I had to help myself. So the way to do that, personal, was I tried many different things, but it was writing it down so that I saw the physical evidence of, this is a feeling I'm going through again, but I had it here and nothing happened there. So I've got it again and nothing happened there and nothing happened there. So I was training myself just to understand that the physical and the psychological symptoms will always be the same. So it doesn't mean that anything has happened. It's just your body's way of dealing with things. And people have often said to me, yeah, but I get sick and, you know, I'm feeling really bad. And I said, well, look, from a physical element point of view, our adrenal glands, okay, when we get that feeling of sickness or, you know, oh God, nausea, our adrenal glands sit on top of our stomach. And so what happens is when we get anxious, they spill over. So then the acid from the adrenal glands hits the belly, and of course, you know, you're going to get gargling.
Chaos.
Mate, absolutely. And so I didn't know this. So I'm thinking, well, there's got to be something wrong with me because my belly goes like this all of the time. So when I started to understand it, I started to go, okay, so the thought of what I'd done then controlled the emotion, which was scared or angry or something, which then controlled my behaviour, which was to get back in the car and go and check. But the check-in was the problem. So I had to kind of just get to a stage where I went, do you know what? This is going to be so hard, but I have to do this because my why was to get better. And so I often say to people, what's your why? Your why will get you through what you need to get through. But my why was what I needed to do. But that was my distraction. My distraction was writing. Because again, anxiety comes and goes in waves. And so when I was writing and I was anxious, by the time I'd finished probably paragraph 2, my anxiety had maybe gone down to 70. Then it was 50. Then all of a sudden, by the time I finished my page of writing, I wasn't as anxious as I was when I first started writing.
Is that because you was rereading what you had written and it sort of made sense in your head then, actually, what's taken place?
Yeah, I was reaffirming. And that's what we say to people. We try to reaffirm our learning. And so if we can see something and we can educate ourselves and we keep re-educating ourselves, sooner rather than later, it will go into the subconscious, it goes into the consciousness. So then we start to go, okay, I can associate that with that. And like I said, you know, it doesn't mean that everyone's going to do it and get fixed. Listen, every journey is personal. And so that's what we try to do, is just educate the process in order to be able to help the individual.
No, I think that's brilliant. I think we'll finish that there.
Okay.
Do you think?
Yeah,
I
100%.
think we've covered quite a lot there, and I think it's fantastic you've joined us. And Martin's going to be joining us on a monthly basis. The subject matter next time round, I think maybe depression is a reasonable subject to cover.
100%.
And obviously, please join us next time on the channel. Please subscribe, and look forward to seeing you.